All right, so this is, as I mentioned, Teaching Tuesdays for Passive Cash Flow for Life. Sometimes Nicole teaches, most of the time she teaches, sometimes I teach, and sometimes we just kind of trade off. You know, I'm out of town, she's out of town, or whatever it is. So we kind of work together on this. So today we're going to talk about something very different, but basically transitioning or building a multifamily portfolio, starting off with single family houses. So quick disclaimer, you do not in any way, form, or fashion have to start with single family to get into multifamily. You really, really don't. It's learning a different process, if you will. And yes, it's more units, right? So if you get into multifamily, commercial multifamily is considered 5 units and above. But some people, like even Nicole, started with some duplexes, you know, kind of thing. So you don't have to come in first day and buy 100 units or whatever it is. You know, maybe you buy a fourplex, or maybe you buy a 10 unit or 12 unit or whatever it is you want to do. You can make a lot of money with any of those. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about single family and how to do it. So as I mentioned, 5 or more income producing units are considered commercial. Let's see if I can move this over here. All right. And they're underwritten, and it's funny because we were just talking about this earlier in terms of, Kevin and I were just talking about this earlier in terms of the way that you actually value multifamily is very different than the way that you value single family. Having said that, what we recommend to people that are going to be landlords is to actually underwrite it as if it was a multi-unit. You'll find, I think, that you will get in trouble a lot less of the time. And I think you'll end up doing much better financially. But again, those are for more the buy and hold. Just let these people in. So we use something called an income approach to actually do that. So what you're basically doing when you're buying multifamily, and again, what we recommend you do when you're buying single family, if you're buying a lot of them, is to actually use the income approach, right? So at the end of the day, you are, yes, buying a building, but you're really buying a business, right? You're buying a cash flow, you're buying an income stream, if you will. And when you do something like that, as opposed to when you go and get a hard money loan or a loan or whatever it may be for a single family, where they will basically look at you and go, okay, how much can you afford? Or as you get more and more units, they'll start looking at what the actual product or the actual unit produces. But again, we use income approach to everything. You can literally have 2 buildings built by the same person, the same year, exact same floor plans, 20 units, both literally on the same street right next to each other, but owned by different people. And this building will be worth 5 million, and this building will be worth 2.5 million, right? Exact same building, same upgrades, same everything. And it's really because it's based on the income, right? The one that's 5 million is making a lot more cash flow, right, than the one that is worth 2.5 million. So therefore, it's a little bit easier to kind of track how much a building is actually worth versus, oh, I got a comp and that one has 3 bedrooms, mine has 4. Is it close, kind of thing? This is all data, which to me is exciting because I like data. So there's not a lot of guessing, if you will. All right, Ernie's joining. All right, so all right, so let's do this for me. All right. Okay, so if you already have rentals, like, you know, we know people that before they got into multifamily, you know, had a lot of single family, you know, 100, 80, 75, that kind of thing. Now, it took them a very long time to get there. But you know, they've accumulated a lot of them, and a lot of people don't have any, and some people have 3 or 4, whatever it is. You can actually take your single families and bundle them all into a commercial loan, right? As you may or may not know, as you're doing single family, the way I understand it, and Jane and Sharon, you guys would know better, but I think the cap is 5 or 10 before a bank will no longer start lending to you unless they're a portfolio bank. Is that correct?
I think it's 5.
Yeah, I think maybe 5.
Is it 5? Okay. So obviously, if you do want to stay in single family, what we recommend you do is take your first 5 put them under a commercial loan, right? So then you have one, and then you can go start stacking again if that's what you want to do. There's a lot of ways to I guess get ownership, if you will, or get control over a property outside of, putting 25% down and getting a loan or whatever it is. And we teach all those obviously in the academy, but there's lots of strategies. So you may not have to wait to physically buy, 5 properties to actually put them into and you have to do it right, obviously, but in order to put them under a commercial loan, but that's available to you if that's what you want to do. Stuff like lease options, lease purchases, takeover payments, long-term leases with an option, work for equity, all sorts of different things you can do. And what you're going to do with all these is make the contracts 5 years or more. And then as they become more and more valuable, when you do cash them out, you can put them all underneath one commercial bundle, or you can sell all 5 of them, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, and actually leapfrog into a a commercial unit. And again, Jane and Sharon, this is not my area of expertise, so feel free to jump in anywhere. All right, so does anybody not know what a 1031 is? You can just unmute if you want. Okay, so a 1031 is a part of the tax code, which basically allows you to take the earnings from a property that you're going to sell and transition all that equity into a new property, and you don't pay tax on the difference, right? So if you bought a property for 500 grand and now it's worth $1 million, right? Your basis was 500 and you're selling it for $1 million. So now you're making 500 grand, right? But if you've ever been a flipper, you know that out of that 500 grand, they're going to take earned income taxes, which can be in some cases 50% when by the time you add in state and everything else or whatever it is. So half your money goes out the window, right? With a 1031 exchange, and there's certain ways you do that, there's certain laws, there's actually people that actually do this, companies that actually do this for you. And there are certain things you have to follow in terms of, size of the next deal, how long you have to actually get it under contract, what it can be, that kind of thing. But what you basically do when you do a 1031 exchange is you take that 500 grand, right, worth of equity, and you take the entire thing, not half, because of tax, you take the entire thing and you move it into the next property tax-free. Now, it's really tax deferred if you want, because at some point you will pay taxes on it. It just depends on what you want to do. If you stop doing 1031 exchanges, then you will owe money on, all those taxes, if you will. Nicole and I don't sell anything. So I don't know if you guys know this, but when someone passes away, the basis for the value of the property goes up to whatever it is that day. So if I bought a mobile home park, 5 years ago for $10 million, and then when I pass away, it's worth $20 million, right? You would think that, okay, you're going to get taxed on those, or your heirs will get taxed on those $10 million of equity. Actually, no, what happens is it goes up to 20 million, and then from there on, it grows. So my kids will not pay any taxes on that, because that's part of the rule. Now you start getting into estate taxes and stuff like that, and obviously that's something else. But for the most part, it goes over to them tax-free, and there's all sorts of different ways to do that. But 1031 is an amazing, amazing thing. They've tried to get rid of it a couple times, which scares me, but every time they keep it. So the other ways to do stuff, obviously, in terms of trying to get to that 5 units, is to buy duplexes and triplexes or even fourplexes, and you live in them for 1 or 2 years. You basically do what's called house hacking, right? And then you refinance and you go get another one. And then when you get 5 or more units, so maybe you have a duplex and a fourplex, you put them together, you go get a commercial loan, and you kind of do it all over again. Fannie Mae actually has, and I've got to go look it up because a guy told me about a year ago, but they actually have a Fannie Mae loans for fourplexes, where if you live in there for a year, they will give you standard residential rates, which are usually a little bit cheaper than commercial rates. And we have somebody actually that bought, I want to say it's 11 or 12 units, like I never remember, down in Charles Village in Baltimore, I live in Ellicott City, which is about 35, 40 minutes from Baltimore. So Charles Village is a relatively nice area of Baltimore, and he bought it, and him and his wife house hacked, if you will. A little bit different because it was a bigger unit or whatever it is, and he still lives there, right? And they clear 7 to 8 grand a month, right, from a little 11 or 12 units. So there's a lot of ways to do it. That was just the way that he decided to do it, and he really likes the cash flow, and he basically lives for free, right? So, all right, what else is on here? Okay, so I think a lot of
Hey
times,
James, this is Mike Hawkins.
yeah,
Let me cover something with 1031. I think is very important before people kind of dive into it. So
right,
1031 has a 45-day deadline. So for example, you sell a property, what you're trying to do is avoid capital gains tax.
right.
So if you extend past that 45-day mark, then you lose that money. So it's really important that you have to leverage that money. And what I normally advise people to do if they're doing a 1031 is have a property lined up prior to going into a 1031, because technically how it works, you have to put it in the escrow, and you can potentially lose that money if you don't execute a new transaction or new acquisition of a property within that 41-day period. So that's very important to kind of mention hand in hand with the 1031 regulation.
Yeah, I'm not, they may have updated that. I think you have to identify 4 separate properties within the 45 days, and then have to close within 180, but I may be wrong. I mean, you may be absolutely right. I'm not really sure. I haven't done one in a little while. But definitely something to think about. And he's absolutely right, though, that if, you do have a time commitment, and if you, go past that time commitment, you won't lose all your money, but you will pay taxes on the money. So you're kind of back to square one, right? So the obvious thing is to try and get it done and save yourself, and that way you can grow your portfolio much, much faster because you're saving all that money in taxes. But as Mike just mentioned, there is a time component to that. And there are actual companies that you need to use kind of as a fiduciary to be able to do this. And they've got all the rules, and they've got all sorts of tips and tricks and stuff like that on how to do it properly. But people have been doing this for years, and it's very, very profitable. In terms of single family, a lot of people are just more comfortable with single family, and that's fine. But you do have to get started, right? Um, when I was buying single families to flip, I would, buy them from wholesalers or realtors that were investor friendly would bring them to me, or somebody would call me or something like that, or whatever it was. And I was always amazed at the properties that I bought from investors, right? Not just, Joe and Mary getting a divorce. They just want out. They don't care. They just need to, get rid of the house or whatever it is. But people that were actually investors and just wanted to get out, right? And the common theme amongst those was always tenant driven, right? It was always like, oh, I'm so tired of tenants. I get calls at 4 o'clock in the morning, or I've got to go fix, the typical thing you hear about, right? Go fix the toilet, or, something broke, or I've got to go show the houses, or whatever it may be. And, they become burnt out landlords. Um, Nicole still buys with somebody else in West Virginia. She's building a portfolio for, well, you have to find out about her 10-year-old. Her 10-year-old is got more properties than most adults do at this point. But we don't, from a multifamily standpoint, we do not manage any of our own properties. Never have, never will. And we actually recommend that even from a single family standpoint, you don't actually manage your own properties. Obviously, it'll cost you a little bit more based on whatever the percentage is that the property management company charges you. But whether that be 7, 8, 9, 10% for a single family, our feeling is that it's more than worth it because they are professionals at doing specifically that. And you do have to find the right property management companies, and we teach you guys how to do that, obviously. But once you find the right property management company, then you buy one, give it to them, move on. Buy another one, give it to them, move on. And then you just check in once a month with your financials and go, okay, these are all running right. Oh, look, my 7th property is not doing what I wanted to do. Let me pick up the phone, call the property management company, find out what's going on, fix it, and kind of move on. As opposed to buying 2 or 3, and all of a sudden you're spending, 20, 25, 30% of your time being a landlord versus being a business owner, right? So if you can, do it at all. We highly recommend. Some people are like, I just want to manage my first one, so I learn how to do it, and that's fine. But again, we don't recommend it. The other side of that too is that if you want to buy something, if you live in Maryland and you want to buy something in Nashville, which is a growing market, you're not going to drive down there, right, to kind of show the property, if you will. So you're going to have to find a property manager at some point, if you want to build and get bigger and stuff like that, if you want to move out of the area. So there's lots of really good ways to find good property management companies. The old adage is that it doesn't matter how good a deal is, single family or multifamily. If we cannot find a good property management company, in every instance, we will walk away.
One of the things that I've learned, just to add a piece, is once your tenants know that you're the owner, they start counting your money.
Yes.
That's one of the first things that got me out of. I had one when I first started,
Right.
and I was the landlord, I was the wrench, I was the screwdriver. They would always call me, and then one particular day I had to meet the tenant to go over some things. They looked at the car I was driving, and all of a sudden they started counting my money. And for anybody that's looking at this, that's that you don't want that to start happening, because then you start chasing your rent.
Yeah. No, that's a huge call out. Thanks, Wayne. That's very, very true. I would recommend, even if you have to go out to your property to go visit it or something like that, and you do meet the tenant, you are not the owner. You work for the insurance company, you work for the property management company, you're a friend, whatever it is. Even when I owned a restaurant, I didn't tell people I was the owner, right? It was always like, oh, listen, man, we got to do this, but the owner is the one that's hammering down. I'm just the manager kind of thing. You really, really don't want to tell people you're the owner if you can possibly avoid it, because yes, they count your money. And then it's almost like, and not all, right, but there's always tenants that you hear about. It's like, oh, something, my rent's going to be late because my car broke down, or this happened, or that happened, or whatever it is. And you're going to have a much harder time saying no to someone when you control the purse strings, if you will, versus a property manager saying, no, I'm sorry, because I answer to the owner, and basically they have to pay their mortgage. So I'm sorry this happened to you, but we can't help you out, kind of thing. You need to pay the rent, or unfortunately or sadly you can't stay. But if they know you're the owner, you're going to be getting a lot of those excuses, from what I understand, from a lot of the people. And you want to try and keep, I guess, our arms width apart, to make sure that doesn't happen to you. All right, so. All right, so this is what I told you guys about. This is Nicole's presentation, right? So Nicole still has 4 companies that they just hold single family houses. So this is what's wonderful about the other company, about the Academy, right? Every one of these strategies is actually lined up in a different class for it, and she's kind of proof in the pudding, right? And so are Sharon and Jane, right? So she has stuff that she's bought that are now rentals. She's had stuff that she holds under lease options. She's got owner financing, and she's probably got 10 other ways that she's actually accumulated properties that are now part of her portfolio, outside of going and putting down 20% cash, or whatever it may be, or a standard note, or whatever it may be. So she's got about 100 houses, right, between those companies. And as a lot of sometimes houses cash flow more than apartment buildings do per unit, right? And Baltimore is kind of an anomaly. You probably get higher cash flow here than anywhere else in the country. But on average, when you first buy an apartment building, you'll make, first year, right, about $100 per unit, right? Now, as time goes on, you can make 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it may be, $100 a unit, because as the mortgage is going down, rent is going up, that kind of thing. There's all sort of things that you can do to kind of make that happen. But in the beginning, count on about $100 a month. Having said that, we have a student with a little, I think it's 22 or 23 unit, here in Maryland that clears about 180 grand a year, clears after mortgage, after expenses, everything else, with a little 22 unit. Now, it took them 3.5 years, almost 4 years to get there, right? But that's a nice chunk of change for a little, 22, 23 unit, if you do it right. So in the beginning, $100 a month. And after that, it goes up considerably if you run it right? If you have the property managers run it the way you want it to be managed. And then kind of the same thing with single family houses. I think you can make 150, 200. We had a good friend of ours who sadly has passed away, but he would not buy a house in Baltimore unless it cleared $500 a month for him. And he had, I don't know, 60, 70 houses, something like that. So, and they were in really, really rough parts of Baltimore, don't get me wrong. But, that was something he was really, really good at. The challenge also with having single family houses versus multi-unit is, even though they cash flow better, then you've got like 10 different statements, if you will, in terms of how everything operates, versus if you have a 10 unit, you've got one statement, you've got one set of expenses, you've got one roof. It's a little bit easier from a financial standpoint to actually, I guess, manage it. Your accountant will thank you for that. And in terms of your taxes, you do need to have a good accountant. And we have, I guess she mentions him here, Jeff Cohen, who's up in Reisterstown, who's phenomenal. He's done a bunch of our properties, continues to do an amazing, amazing job. But there's lots of different tax strategies you can use when you're buying properties, single family properties, under a lot of these different strategies. All right, where are we here? Keep moving this around. Okay, so this is interesting. So we've done this actually with a couple of mobile home parks. So at some point, our tenants stay, anywhere between 4 and 5 years. And we do a lot for our paying tenants. And the reason we do that is turns are usually your biggest expense, right? So the longer you can keep someone in an apartment or a house, right, the better it is. So we pay a lot of attention to the people that pay on time and that are good tenants, just as much as a lot of people pay attention to the bad tenants, the ones that are paying, that don't pay on time, or make noise, or whatever it may be. I think a lot of people focus on the bad tenants. If you focus on the good tenants, you'll be able to keep them for a very long time. And even if they move on to something else, there's still a way that you can provide them value and continue your cash flow. So sometimes what we'll do, and we've done this more with mobile home parks, but you can also do it with regular apartment units. At some point, someone lives in a 2-bedroom, they've got 1 child and they have 2 child, and they want to work, move into a house or whatever it is. If you have a portfolio of houses already, you can set it up. It's called path to home ownership, basically. So that individual can transition from that apartment into a single family home that you own, right? And you can set up whatever it is that you want. Not that they're going to buy it outright, right? But maybe you'll do owner financing with them or some other kind of creative strategy, so they continue to pay you monthly. The difference now is that they're paying down their mortgage. So at some point, just like everybody else, they'll pay off their mortgage and they'll own a home. But versus just having them as a client for 3, 4, 5 years, you can have them as a client for 20, 25, 30 years, right? If you do something like that. And this is, I think she put it in here. Let me see. Yeah. All right, so this is actually the program, if you will. So you can do this a bunch of different ways, right? And we'll send these slides out if anybody wants them. Just email me kind of to see what this picture looks like. But there's all sorts of different strategies you can use. Some of it is based on bad credit, right? We will, right, rent or sell to someone with bad credit if that bad credit has something to do with maybe like a medical bill or something like that. A lot of that stuff happens. I mean, if they're not paying their cell phone bill or they're not paying their water bill, we're not renting to them, right? Because if they're not going to pay their cell phone bill, they're definitely not going to pay your rent. But a lot of stuff happens with medical with a lot of people, so we kind of push that aside. We don't take that into consideration as much as a lot of other people do because, life happens, right? But there's different steps you can actually take in this in terms of how much they want to put down. And obviously, the more they put down, the smaller their mortgage payment is going to be. And you can also, in terms of an interest rate that you're going to charge, if you're going to do that, you can obviously, if they're a lower risk, you can charge a little bit lower interest. And if they're higher risk, obviously you can charge a slightly higher interest. I would just be very careful in terms of making sure you don't gouge people, right? It happens, and it's happened a lot, and people get in trouble for it and stuff like that. There is now a new law passed by Congress, it's been around for a little while, which basically says that if you do more than 3 of these a year, you have to follow a certain process. And that process means that you have to have your possible buyers do sit down with a mortgage broker and make sure that they qualify for the monthly rent or monthly payment that you're offering them, right? With the idea being, because what a lot of people were doing a long time ago is like, oh, great, you don't have credit, you got a very small down payment. Awesome. I'll charge you 12%, right? For your house. And then after 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or whatever it is, something happens, they miss, guy would foreclose on them, and then you just start the whole process all over again, which is obviously not right, but obviously gives a lot of investors a really, really bad name. So the whole idea behind the rule was that once you do more than 3, you do have to go through paperwork, and you find a mortgage broker that will work with you, and you give them a fee, $500 or whatever it may be, for them to actually underwrite the person. You keep those records, make sure that they qualify for the loan that you're giving them, and then kind of move forward from there. And again, if you have single family houses and that's kind of where you're starting, and then you buy a small apartment building or a large apartment building, this allows you to keep your clients much further than the 3 or 4 or 5 years, or like in a lot of places, 1 or 2 years. All right, so that is it. Let me do, if I can do this, hold on. Let's see. There we go. All right. I think it ended. So, all right. So, and I think hopefully Jane and Sharon are still here for some of the single family questions, but are there any questions? We've been going for like 30 minutes. So, any questions we can answer about this or about multifamily in general, which is a little bit more of my strength, obviously, but any questions at all about anything? I don't know if you saw that last slide. The 4-day class is coming up here on Thursday. If you want to get into multifamily, it literally is the best thing you can do. I don't know how many people I've talked to that have not gotten some level of training and have lost 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand on their first deal, small deal kind of thing. So educate yourself, and that's true of anything you do, I think. But especially when you're going to put money down on a property, you should educate yourself in one way or the other. So we don't have a lot of people, so if you just want to ask a question or something like that, you can just unmute and kind of go from there.
Hi, I have a quick question for
Yeah.
you. I just want to make sure I understood what you said properly. You said the income approach for multifamily is based on the rent, and I understand that. But you also stated something about multifamily. You're getting on average, you should expect to get an average of $100 per unit. So if you have a 12 unit, your profit is only $1,200. Is that what I'm understanding?
The first year, yes. It depends. I mean, sometimes it can be 2,400, sometimes it can be more or less, whatever it may be. But we are incredibly conservative in our underwriting. And when you think about it, it's not a lot of money. $1,200 for a 12 unit is not a lot of money. Having said that, right, if you do half of what this other guy did, right, in 4 years or whatever it is, you're making $90,000 a year from that little 12 unit.
But when you're looking to buy it and you're analyzing it, like you analyze in a single family, you're looking based on the ARV and the comps, etc. So are you saying when you're analyzing a multifamily, if you see a 12 unit selling for $1.2 million, you got to look at it to see if you can clear $100 per unit, and if so, it's a good deal? Is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding with this income approach?
So it's 2 separate pieces, right? So when you underwrite a deal, the basic formula is, right, you take whatever the top line revenue is. So let's say it's $1,200 per unit, and you've got 10 units to make the math easier, right, or whatever it is. So that's 12 grand a month, and you multiply that times 12, so you got 144 grand a year, right?
Right.
On average, for bad debt and vacancy and things like that, we take 10% right off the top, right? So we've got 144, and we're going to take 10% of that 14.4 basically and chop it off the top, right? So now our effective gross income is whatever that is, about 130 grand. And then we're going to take 45% of that for expenses. It might be a little bit less, they might be a little bit more, but on average, we run our properties at 45%. And then once you do that and you subtract that, you've got something called NOI, which is net operating income, right? So that's all of your income minus all of your expenses before you pay your mortgage.
Okay.
Okay, so when you do that and you look at a property and interest rates are really high right now, so you're going to have to, work to find a really good deal. They're out there, believe me, we've been putting LOIs out for a little while, but you definitely have to find something that actually works. And then when you look at an underwriting spreadsheet, right, it'll tell you, okay, great. Here's what your income is. Here's what your mortgage is going to be. Here's how much the rents are going to go up if you do a value add or something like that over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And here's how much money you're going to make. And it's like a curve, right? It starts off here and then it just kind of keeps going up. This is not get rich quick by any means, right? You can do really, really, you can create not just cash flow, you can create wealth doing it, but you're not going to do it in a year. To make some good money, it's going to take you 3 or 4 years to actually do that, depending on what your definition is of good money, right? And then you can do incredibly well. But yeah, in the beginning, it is not get rich quick, Some people actually buy properties that don't even make that, right? They'll make, I know, they're like, something, I'll ride it out and I'll wait till I get there. And I'm like, dude, there's no way, I'm not taking money out of my pocket to pay the mortgage kind of thing, But, think about it, right? So you could buy in Dallas, right? 10 years ago, you could buy in a decent area of town, right? On a per unit basis, you could buy a 10 unit and each apartment would cost you about 40 grand, right? That same unit today, right, is worth 130 grand. And that's only in 10 years, right? And the rent is not kind of kept up with that, right? So again, it's kind of a long-term play. You kind of have to look down the road and go, okay, I'm not walking away from my job for several years, but when I walk away from my job, I'm never going back. So do you do single families now?
I do single family. So like I'm in Baltimore, I'm in PG, I'm in Anne Arundel, and I average about conservatively $900 cash flow positive per month, especially in Baltimore.
How much did you put down?
Well, the way I do it is I will buy the house typically 100% in cash, or I'll use a hard money lender. So I essentially use the Burr method. I do the Burr method, and I essentially get all my money back when I refinance.
Okay.
So I have no money in the deal, and I still average out to about $800-900 a month profit.
Okay, well, you're doing much better than a lot of people are then. And maybe you want to keep doing that. You just kind of take some of your properties and you put them under a commercial loan or something like that to get a rate or whatever it is. That's about as high as I've heard, unless you've got it paid off or you put down a tremendous amount of cash. Because a lot of people will come to me and go, oh, something, I'm making $1,000 a month. And I'm like, all right, but if you back it out and see how much money you put in there, what is your actual return on investment, right? What is your ROI, if you will? It sounds like you're doing something different. You're very successful at it. Maybe we'll get you to come in and teach a class, because that's great money, for a single family home. That's worth the headaches.
It's worth the headache. yeah. It's okay, but I just get tired of running around from a bunch of different. And I manage my own properties myself. I don't use a property manager.
Yeah.
And I teach people how to rehab and flip and all this other stuff too. And I got a regular full-time job for the federal government, so I'm all over the place. But I like the multifamily because I'm tired of having 15 properties. I'd rather have one property that has 15 units.
Yep.
So when I send my maintenance guy, he's checking one roof, and you don't have 15 different boilers, and I have to change the air filters. That's 15 different sizes.
Yep.
That's why it appeals to me, even though I'm making decent money. The headaches are a lot. The tenants don't want to change the filters, so you got to keep sending somebody, paying them $50 per filter.
Right.
So I like the concept of multifamily a lot better.
Right.
I didn't realize they're only making like $100. That sucks.
That's year one.
It still sucks. It's horrible.
Well, maybe what you could do if you want to get into multifamily and get rid of those headaches, I would recommend actually you get a property management company, right, and pay them their 8, 9, or 10% or whatever it is, and then you just got to watch them once a month, make sure that you're on them, kind of thing. Or what some people have done is like, I'm making great money, but I'd hate the hassle or whatever it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it, get a loan, take that money and go buy a multifamily. And in 5, 6, 7 years, it'll be worth, whatever, $1 million. I mean, we've got buildings that clear in cash flow, right, in our pockets, over $1 million a year. I suspect it's a little hard to do that with single family. I may be wrong because you make a ton of money, man, for a house. But and it's not one building, obviously, but it's one asset, right? So I mean, it just kind of depends, I guess. Everyone's got their different thing going on. So I was doing flips, making really good money, but after a while it just got to be a job. And I just didn't want to do it anymore, but 30, 40, 50 grand a pop is kind of hard to walk away from. But you don't want to be doing it for the rest of your life, right? Or at least I did. That's just my own personal thing, I wanted to be home. I've watched my daughters grow up. I've been here the entire time, kind of thing. So it's been phenomenal. But
that's why I do both. I do the flips and I do the land loan at the same time.
Okay, all right.
So like I do like for every 3 flips, I buy 1 to keep, buy and hold. So I do 3 flips and I keep 1. So that's my formula.
Right. So Nicole ended up starting to do the same thing, right? So she'd do 1, she'd buy 2, keep 1, sell another. Buy 2, keep 1, sell another. And the reason that she got into multifamily, and again, I can't speak to this because I've never had single family rentals, but her explanation is basically at some point she found out that either it's rented or it's not rented. So it's either a 1 or a 0. So if someone leaves and it takes you 3, 4 months to get them out, not in your case, but in most cases, right? People have lost their entire cash flow for the entire year because of some knucklehead tenant that took 3, 4 months to get out, especially in Baltimore City, right? I mean, that place is just a train wreck. So after a while, she's like, this is nuts. So she started buying, multifamily. And that's where she makes all her money, off multifamily. Because if you had a 10 unit right now, right, and 2 tenants left, that's okay. You're still making money, right? Your mortgage is paid for, your expenses are paid for, your insurance is paid for, your taxes are paid for. It's okay. But on a single family, if someone leaves for 4 months and your rent is $2,000, that's $8,000, right? So for you at $900 a month, you're losing like 8 months worth of cash flow. You're still making months, or whatever the math is, or whatever it is. So everyone's different. It really just depends on what you want to do. It sounds like you've been very, very successful in single family. So maybe you kind of want to dip your foot into buy a small multifamily and kind of ride both and see how you do.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to do it. Let me just
James,
check.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a lot of these other things come across my plate here, and I don't just want to broker them. How would I kind of stay in? Like, if I could bring a good opportunity, I underwrite some of it, and I'm just looking for like the capital partner or the build out partner, the GC or so. How can I really work my way in to share a little bit more of the equity? I try to get a little bit of commission on the front end so it can hold me over through the build, but then to stay in the project a little bit longer too.
Well, so I mean, I think you kind of answered your own question, right? So you want equity, right? So you want to try either to get part of the flip money, or build a portfolio where you do sweat equity basically, and in return for that, you get 30 or 40% or 50% or whatever you can negotiate of equity, right? We do that all the time in multifamily, right? Someone will bring me a deal and it's like, listen, I don't pay a fee or something like that. If you want a small piece of equity, I'll let you have a small piece of equity, and that way you're involved in the deal. And most people want that. So I would do the same thing with single family. And again, Jane and Sharon can talk much better about this than I can, and they'll be on here in about 11 minutes. But let's say you, right, no one brings it to you, but you find a deal, right? And you're like, all right, I'm going to buy this for, I don't know, in New Jersey. I'm going to buy this for $10 million. I'm going to buy this for whatever the price is. And, you've been a project manager, so you kind of go in there, you kind of say, okay, it's going to cost me 70 grand to do the rehab. And by the time you do the math, you're like, okay, if I did this, right, I would make $50,000 on a flip, right? And now you've been networking with people and stuff like that, right? And you go to someone that wants to make money in real estate, but they are way too busy with their regular job, right? They're not like John, who is like, I'm going to do both, right? They're just like, something, I want to come home, want to relax. but I've got this money in my self-directed IRA or my IRA that I want to invest. So you would say, hey, listen, you know something, I'll partner with you. Okay. You put up the money, right? And I'll do all the work. I'll find the GC, I'll sell the property, I'll buy the property, I'll do all of that other stuff, but I'll basically use your money. And at the end of the 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, however long it takes, we split the money. And a lot of people like that. They're like, they get to get into real estate, they get to get a really good bang for their buck, right? But they don't get their hands dirty. And they're not experts in that. They don't have to go and learn how to do this because it is an art or a skill, if you will, that you have to, I guess, obtain, if you will. But there's a lot of people out there doing it. And I know some people are like, well, yeah, but then I don't get the whole 50 grand, right? Kind of thing. And my argument always is, yeah, but you know, 50% of something is a lot better than 100% of nothing.
Well, that's what I'm kind of looking on with this one is
Right.
I have the capital, right? He's pretty much he's really the GC, right? He wants the construction, and then he's got an investor that's going to bring the capital. Right now, I'm just acting as the agent, you
Okay.
know, under my broker, and I'd rather not just take a small commission. If I'm like, look, if I'm there's got to be something more than, hey, I'm bringing this to you, but I want to stay in it. Maybe I'm not going to make. I'll sacrifice some of my commission, but I want, you know, more on the back end, not just the listings after. Like that would be my end goal.
Right.
But it's like, can I eat a little bit in the front, sacrifice some of that just so I can get more of the equity on the back end and not just, you know, the resale.
Yeah, and I mean, we've done that with brokers before where we're like, you know, if you want, you know, we will actually pay your commission, not the seller, so we get a better deal. And in exchange for that commission, we will give you a piece of equity for whatever your 200 or 300 grand or whatever it was for their broker's fee. You just have to understand that when people are looking at this, they're going to go, okay, great, nice guy. What value is he bringing to the table that I'm going to exchange part of our equity for? Right?
Well, it's either the property. It's like you either get some enough, you know, a little bit of
Right,
something, or you're
exactly.
not
So,
going to get the
you know,
property at all.
you may start with something small, you know, where you don't get a lot. Maybe you give up half your commission or whatever it is, and you
Yeah,
guys
that's
kind
what
of
I'm
do the
thinking.
math and figure it out. And maybe the value is, listen, you know, if I can get a piece of equity here, a very small piece in exchange for part, because I know you need the commission to live on, right? For part of my commission, and this works out, then I'll keep bringing you deals. And then all of a sudden you provided a lot more value, right? Because all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're the guy that's bringing the deals, and the GC doesn't have to look for deals, the investor doesn't have to look to deals, and at some point you can say, you know something, I think my value is worth a third. I'm finding the deals, you know, I would like to get a third or 25% or whatever it is. Everything's negotiable, right? It just
Right.
has to be something that they feel like, you know something, he brings something to the table that either I can't do or I don't want to do.
Yeah. And that's why I want to show the value, like, because it's taken a lot of work and I don't get paid
Right,
unless somebody buys something or sells
right,
something. So it's like,
right,
if I'm putting these under contract or getting them to the table, now I
right.
just need, because I don't have a couple $1 million sitting around yet,
Yeah,
you know, but
yeah,
some of these bigger opportunities, if I just, instead of getting a small commission that now I got to split, you know, 30 or plus, you know,
yeah,
to the broker too, which is great. I love my broker,
right,
but I want to learn to stay in these things longer. And so I can keep, you know, if I can secure that I can show this, now my brokerage is making more money. I'm making a little bit, but I'm also gaining on the
right,
back end over time, you know, to kind of show the banks like, all right, now I'm making some money coming in. Because
right,
from a, you know, from a realtor's point of view, you know, I don't have a W-2 anymore. So when I go to
right,
look for a loan, it's like, what have you had come in so far?
right. What do you where do you find your investors?
A lot of RIAs and
Okay.
you know, some meetup groups. You know, I just kind of go to a lot and just
Right.
find out what they're looking for, and then if I see something that I'm farming, you know, I
Yeah.
try to send it across their desk, and they'll tell me yes or no.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I was going to recommend is just get in the game, you know, and having people get your name known out there. You know, get a Blink card, like I was just talking to Jane and Sharon about, or some really, really nice business cards or whatever it is, and just get your name out there, you know. Some of the things that we've done in the past is for our students more than anybody else is we used to send out a newsletter every couple of weeks, right? It wasn't really a newsletter. It's like I would read some really interesting articles and I go, hey, this is kind of what I think. And then we kind of send it out and be like 2 articles or something like that. But people found value in that because they're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. James sent me this thing or whatever it is. You could do the exact same thing for your list of investors, right? Something that keeps you front of mind all the time, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want them to look to you to go, hey, have you found anything? You know, I'm looking for you to find me something. And then again, like I said before, if you build value, then they'll give you more and more equity, and you kind of build from there. Everybody starts small, man. You know, so you got to start somewhere.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah, sure. All right, we probably got time for maybe one question or something like that. I don't know, something's in the chat. Let's see. Conditions. Okay, thanks, Jane. She answered.
Hey James, we were hearing something about storage lockers. Are they are you getting less return now, or can you speak to that?
I'm sorry, in terms of storage lockers, like Amazon storage lockers, or like storage
Yeah, storage facilities.
storage facilities. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we just talked about this
Or
last
they were
week.
kind of dying out or something this weekend.
I'm sorry, are you asking if we're going to talk about that this weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are actually going to talk about it. I heard part of it. So yes, we are going to talk. So we're going to talk about multifamily, so apartment buildings, mobile home parks, and self-storage units. And actually, one of our students actually spoke at our meetup last week, I think it was, Mike Moreno, that is he's a dentist. And he's getting ready, I guess, to walk away from his practice. And he specializes, that was his niche. He's like, you know something, I like self-storage, I'm gonna go do self-storage. And he's done very, very, very well. I think he took a class like 4 or 5 years ago, and I want to say he's got like 17 or 18. Not, you know, individuals, but 17 or 18 properties, right? So he's done really well. And they're really hard to find good deals, but that's true with anything, right? But if you do the work, and he spends some money on marketing and stuff like that, and really hustles or whatever it is, the interesting thing about what he's done with self-storage is that outside of going down to do due diligence on the property, if the contractor LOI is accepted, he doesn't visit any of his own properties, right? There's stuff he hasn't been to since he started, 4 years ago, whatever it is. He went down there to do due diligence, and then it just kind of, it's very hands-off. You don't make a ton of money, per unit, but, it adds up. You're buying 200 units, 300 units at a time, versus maybe a smaller apartment building. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. Hopefully that was a question.